Hey guys, so here I'm going to show you how to navigate to use and to edit a material in Maya and what that means to you as a 3D artist. Let me go and turn off my display, heads up display poly count, because we don't really need that right now. You want to turn those off if you're animating and you're not modeling. That's basically just to keep count of things. And you can see we have three different objects in here. We have a cup, we have a book, we have an apple. And I'm using the scene from our in-class exercise so you can get a better understanding of how these work, because each one of these requires a different material, and each one of these we can edit so you can get a better feel for how Maya handles things in the material editor. Now, by default, when you make an object, you'll notice it has a wireframe to it, and if you've had hard surface, and some of you guys have not, but principles, even then you should know this, when you hit the 5 key, you'll see that each new object that you make will have this solid type color to your object. Right now I have the wireframe on, which is fine. But this solid color that comes in is OpenGL at its finest and is the default material for an object. So when you build stuff in Maya, every object in the beginning is going to have this default material. You never want to keep this default material on your object, because what happens is every new object that you make needs to have its own unique material in order to have its own unique texture, because that texture is connected to that material. If you left the default on all these objects, if I came in here and decided, all these guys all have the same default, you can see Lambert 1, Lambert 1. If I went in here and I maybe changed the color of this material under Lambert 1 and say, hey, I want you to be white, all of them will be white. And you don't want that. You don't want a white apple, because that's weird. And you may not want a white cup, and you want everything to have its own material. So what we're going to do is, I'm going to close this real quick because we're going to pop it up again, is we're going to assign a material, a unique one, to each object. And there's several ways to do that. One of them, I'm going to open up Windows, and we're going to go to our render editors, and we'll open up the Hypershade. We're going to get into this guy a lot later on, but he's going to be your best friend when it comes to material and lighting. The Hypershade is great, but let me show you a little bit how this works. So we have the Hypershade here. This is one way we can create a new material and apply it to an object. And another way is we can right click on each object, and I'll do it differently for each one. And I'll go in here and say right click, and I'll assign a new material. You'll see the mini menu pop up here of our little, it's like a little piece of our Hypershade. And I'm going to choose, since he's a cup, I'm going to choose the material such as Fong. We'll click Fong, and he's a shiny object. Oh, that was the book, my bad. Let me do Control Z. Now the book, we'll just say it's an old book, so we'll choose a different material. We're going to right click, get to watch me do it again. Assign a new material. We'll do, we'll say he's boring. We'll say he's Lambert. There we go. Just an old book, not too shiny. He's not new, so there's going to be less shininess to him. For some reason I thought I had a cup, but now we have the cup. So we'll select the cup, and if this guy, if we want a new material, so we can right click to get a new material, like you saw me do in just a second. You can do assign existing material, or I can go in here and choose the material over here and just say this will be Fong. We'll choose Fong like we did before. We'll choose Fong E in this case. And Fong E, I can apply him by simply right clicking and just dragging. Sorry, my mouse gets a little fussy sometimes. Zoom out a little bit. I can grab this material, middle mouse drag it to the cup. There we go. Do it really quick. My mouse is super sensitive. Still need to fix that. So now I have Fong E on this guy, and I have a Lambert 2 on this guy. Now anytime you want to rename these, you can right click and you can rename these guys in our Hypershade, and we'll call Fong E Glass. And we can also go in here and click on the object itself. You'll see now that's called glass for the material. You can also go in here, click on the material, and just give it a name here. We'll call this book. There we go. And you always want to organize your materials. And the reason why is somebody can go in here and look into your materials tab, and they can see what you have and what they're named. Now, if you ever are not sure what that material is associated to, you can right click and say, hey man, select objects with material. It's pretty helpful, pretty nice. Gets you where you need to go. Kind of cool. And in the Hypershade, I'll do a quick rundown of this. We'll get into this more later. You'll see that you have the materials, and if you have textures loaded, it'll show you what textures you have. Utilities, which we get into later. Rendering, if you have any rendering nodes and anything else that you might be working with. Lighting, lights, cameras, shading groups, and bake sets and shading groups. We can get to those later on, especially when the mental ray shadows don't come up. We'll talk about those in particular. Bake sets if you're baking, which we'll show towards the end of the class. Projects, whatever project you're working with, and asset nodes, any erroneous or other nodes you're working with. Okay, so that's a real quick rundown, and over here you'll see all the materials and textures that you need, and you can shrink them down or increase their size if need be. You can look in here and see what you have in your render bin, but we're not going to deal with that right now, but I just wanted to show you that real quick. Go back to create, that's the main tab, and you can even grab a material and say, hey man, I want to see what he's connected to, and you can go to graph input output connections. You can see everything that he's associated to, and you can see right now that's not a lot. Alright, so I'm going to close that out. I'll give you a quick rundown of that. So we have each one of these guys have a different material. Let's put one more last one on the apple. I'm going to right click, assign a new material. See the mini menu come up. We'll do blend, and blend is now going to be an apple shader. There we go. And again, each one of these guys need to have their own unique shader in order to put your own unique texture on it later. So as we see that it's all set up, we can now change the color of these, which is cool. So we'll do color. We'll make this red. So I can click on that color channel and change it to red. And there we go. We have a red shiny apple. We have the cup. So we have glass. Let's go to glass. Let's change it. We'll do typical cartoony kind of blue there. And then we can make it transparent. Pretty nice, huh? So these are this is pretty much the generic breakdown of the materials. Just a little bit of explaining how they work. And last but not least, we have the book. Now the cool thing about working with materials, you can add multiple materials to an object. It doesn't have to be one material. Right now we just have one single material on this book, which is Lambert, and you can always check by going into its attributes and hit Control A if this doesn't pop up. By default now with the newest Maya it does pop up, and you can see some of the attributes, and you can see that this is a Lambert right there. So with this guy ready to go, I'm going to switch my view to like a side view. I can go in here and isolate it so that I'm only looking at the pages, or I have the pages selected. With these pages selected, and again you can always double check it in 3D view, you see that I just have the pages. Voila. I can now right click with those faces selected and say assign a new material, and we'll do Lambert because it's just kind of boring. Lambert is probably the most boring material you ever find, and I'll make that white right there. Pretty cool. So now we have white pages on this guy. Now he's all gray, so you'll barely be able to see the white. What we can do now is I can select the whole faces, and watch this, we'll just invert our selection. You can do that through your selection tools, but I like doing it this way because I'm lazy. Now I just have the cover selected, and I can right click with those faces selected, assign a new material, and we'll just do Lambert again. And again, you want to name these. This could be book cover. I'll just cover. And we're going to make it brown. So let's make it brown. There we go. Brownish. And you'll see that that book now has two different materials on it. Pretty cool, huh? So we got the book with the pages, a glass, and an apple. So that's a real quick rundown of how to apply materials to objects. And real quickly here, I'll briefly run down how these materials can be used in what circumstance. If you look at Anisotropic, this guy works really well for like CGs. Did I just say CGs? This is CG. That's ironic. It works good for anisotropic objects such as CDs. You can see the rainbow color that's on the bottom of your CDs, which allows a laser to read the information because it's burned into it. Even an old record would have this type of surface. Even water, believe it or not, has an anisotropic surface. Ever watch yourself pour a glass of water? You'll see a rigid, constant surface and how the light hits it, and you can definitely do that here using this material. And the cool thing about this material, you can go in here and control the direction of the spread and just how thick it is, the angles, you can rotate it, so it's kind of nice. Anisotropic's really cool. So I'm only going to go through a few of these, not all of them, because we get to those later on. There's blend, good areas where blend is used. You can use blend for shiny rocks. It could be a countertop. Doesn't have to be extremely shiny, but it can work pretty well for metal, and you can even dull it out by going into the specular, and the intricity here is the strength of it. and also specular roll off, so you can make it shiny or duller like that, which is kind of cool. We won't get into the hair tube shader for this particular class because it kind of sucks. Oh, was that my outside voice? And then there's also Lambert. Now, Lambert is the most boring. If you can't remember this guy, think of Christopher Lambert, the most boringest actor in the world. I am the last one. And this one could definitely be that material. Not your friend, not mine. I would probably stab him in the hallway because he's so boring. All right, so that's I'm so mean. But he's pretty generic and straightforward. He doesn't have any specular in particular with Lambert. But Lambert can be used for things such as paper, not necessarily shiny, but will refract light, and other objects such as that. Just kind of dull, not too, maybe even a dead piece of wood. No, wood that's dried out. Lambert would be perfect for that. There's layered shaders, which we can get into later. Ocean shaders we get into later. And finally, the last two I want to cover real quick, and one just a little bit on the ramp shader. Phong and Phong-E, these guys are cousins of each other, and each one allow you to have some specular control. One a little more detailed than the other. Now, if we look at Phong and then we look at Phong-E, you'll notice there's a lot more control with Phong-E. You get a little more control with the specularity and how it looks, and in Phong, you don't get quite as much, and you'll see it dumb down a bit here. So there's a little more control with Phong-E. It's kind of like a Phong kind of on steroids. A little bit more control, a little bit more interactivity to be able to control that specularity. And you're probably wondering, why all the funky names? Why are these like Blinn? These are mainly, a lot of these, not all of them, Anisotropic, weirdest last name ever, but most of these are named after the last name of these creators that came up with this. And you can thank some of the founding fathers, some of the guys that worked early with ILM and later eventually Pixar. Some of those guys pioneered this in some universities and so forth. And just smart nerds on free time. This is their last name. They are in the halls of famousness, and no one ever really cares outside of our industry, but it's kind of cool even though. And then finally, ramp shader. This guy's really cool. This allows you to put multiple colors on an object, and with those colors allows you to be able to blend things accordingly, which are kind of nice. See that right there? You can have two different colors playing around each other. It's crazy talk. And we'll get into this one later on. Okay, that's about it. I'm done with materials. Hopefully you understand a little bit of how this works and how to apply them. Again, you can middle mouse drag, right click and apply it, and you can apply it to faces and so forth.